The stalls normally get you going a bit actually. It's important to remember the sequence of events. So about this point here, the instructor would go, engine fails. Oh shit. So fuel's on, mixture full, rich, ignition's on both, and power is at idle. I'm trimming for best glide speed of 60 knots. So now you just want nose up trim, nose up trim, nose up trim all the way to get, watching out for the cloud. 60 knots. Okay, there's my glide speed. All right, looking for a paddock now. Okay, there's my paddock. Just down back on my left-hand shoulder, there's a ridge, slight ridge running through it. And my 1500 foot area is going to be just at the intersection of these trees and 1000 foot area crossing this dirt road here. So that's what I'm lining up for. So basically it's going to be 2000 feet here and 1500 feet here. And that should work out. Okay, I'm a little bit slow. Okay, and now we can probably trim. So now I'm just going to perform S-turns to make it work. So I'm at 3,000 feet. So I've got 1,000 feet to lose before I get to this point here. So I don't want to turn away from my field now. I just want to keep my S-turns going and trying to keep my target speed around 60 knots in the glide. Okay, I've got plenty of time. I can squawk 7,700. And I'll probably change over to Palmerston Tower. Palmerston Tower, Delta Mike Oscar, engine failure. We're about 3 miles to the north of Cheltenham. 2,700 feet. We'll be landing in paddocks below. Delta Mike Oscar, say again, say again. But now we just ignore them because we don't care anymore. We've done that bit. Okay, so you can see we've had the engine fail. I'm just going to check to see if it's working. So now we'd double check our fuel is on. We might cycle the mixture through the full range to make sure that maybe there's some power at some other point. Okay, there's our coming up to 2,500 feet. Here's our paddocks. So now we start doing multiple things at once. So here's our 1,500 foot point. So we're doing all right with that. We're going to aim for this paddock here actually. All right, so this was somewhere around our 1,500 foot area of beam, and this was the 1,000 foot area. So we're going to start setting up for the approach now. So we'd call this a high key and a low key position. Okay, now we'll do a power check. So we've checked everything, ignition's on both, power check. So we'll just do this to warm the engine and pull engine. No, still failed. Okay, no worries at all. So brakes checked, undercarriage down, lock. Mixture is idle cut off now. Power is at idle. Ignition will go off and we'll leave our battery on for the flaps because we need energy for the flaps. There's our 1,500 foot point, of being the upwind part of the field. There's our paddocks looking pretty good. Looks quite clear. There's no power lines. There's I think the wind is going to be slightly favouring. It might be a slight crosswind, but pretty calm winds. We've got trees here to avoid, one tree here to avoid, a bit of a ridge here we need to keep an eye on. Okay, we're coming over to our 1,000 foot point, so we're about 300 feet high. It's all right. So we'll just extend our glide approach turn here. Okay, speed is okay. I'm going to go flaps 10 at this point because we're not low. And remember, we're simulating this, so I will go around off this. Okay, check the speed. Keeping this in mind, and we're aiming for this point here, not here. We're going to aim into the field, and we can just easily move our touchdown point as we need to. I'll go flaps 20 here. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. Still aiming for here. Speed is a bit low, speed is a bit low. Okay, so if you want to just crack your door handle, once we come to a stop, if the aircraft's on fire, then just evacuate out your side door, and I'll see you out front of the aircraft. You're a bit slow. Okay, we can use a bit of side slip to make it into our field. Okay, full flap now. Side slip. Bring it down. Don't want to get the speed too fast. And now we're just committed to the landing. Okay, we're a bit quick, but we've got plenty of room in the field. Okay, that's fine. Go around there, thanks. Okay, full power, flaps 20. Establish a climb. Start trimming nose down because we've got all that nose up trim. Flaps 10. Try and manage that. And we're climbing out. Best rate of climb initially, 65 knots. Flaps up. Okay. 70 knots. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, I mean, it was a bit rusty. It's the first one of those I've done in a long time, so you saw it as it happened. Some of the checks are a little bit rusty, but if you'd been practicing that for the last few weeks, right, leading up to the test, then you do a far better job than I would. So I was a bit high on my all of my my points, but you know, that's the thing. Like, if you select a paddock that you're going to use, keeping a good lookout. We're going to start that turn around to the right, head back to the airfield, and we'll do a precautionary landing on the way. Okay, got it. So as if the paddock that you have got your heart set on is just not a good option, then you've got to be willing to give it away and find another one. So while you do want to have one in mind fairly early, if it just doesn't work, you're best not to fail the flight test by trying to make something work that just wasn't going to work. Because ultimately, if you really have an engine failure, you're keeping an eye out on where you might land, but you're not going to have one paddock in mind. All right, so we start making our way back towards fielding. And this is where the guy's going to say, okay, so the weather's, you've got a wall of cloud, the visibility's poor, so you're going to have to do a precautionary landing. So I'd like to see you set up for your bad weather configuration. Okay, no worries. So for this one, we're going to look for 70 knots with flaps 10 or 20, probably 20. And we'll just maintain 1,500 feet. And he's going to want to see us pick a paddock to simulate a landing in. So to do that, we would first, we'll go flaps 10 there. We'd first need to check it for obstacles, so we'll do essentially a low pass down the field at 500 feet, and then we would position to do the landing, and we'd go around off that as well. Some power lines just going underneath us there. Okay, flaps 20, looking for 70 knots. We've got enough power on that we don't need carb heat. So we'll make our way down towards these paddocks here. Okay, we're a bit slow, so we need some more power. So it's quite draggy. You should be able to fly 70 knots at flaps 20 without this much power. So I'll go back to flaps 10. But in the real aircraft, normally you can actually set this at an intermediate point. I don't know if we can. No, can we? Yeah. Oh yeah, we might be able to. You normally just go for like a flaps 15. So we'll use one of these paddocks over here. So I'm looking for 1,500 feet. Okay, so to set up for my precautionary landing, I'm going to pick one of these paddocks here. Looks pretty good. We'll fly on the left-hand side past these trees here. I'll do a low pass at 500 feet to check for obstacles, sheep, power lines, holes, culverts, ditches, and if it's clear, then we'll position back around for a short field landing. Okay, understood. Meadow 2 traffic, Delta Mike Oscar is 2 miles to the north of Cheltenham, 1,600 feet, operating in the area, carrying out precautionary landing training. We'll practice even. Okay, so we're in here somewhere. It's quite short paddocks, but we don't have much longer. You could use one of these as well, but there's a bit of terrain here, so we might get a bit of turbulence, and also we'd have to climb back out of that little valley. So the instructor wants to see us judge that 500 feet. So he might say something like, okay, so if he'll cover up your altimeter and say, how high do you think you are above the ground right now? And say, oh, I reckon probably about 1,000 feet. And say, you reckon? You really think so? And then you go, shit, I don't know. I thought so. And you say, okay. And you say, well, maybe 800 feet. Okay. And they won't tell you if you're right or wrong. So they're just curious to see if you can judge heights. Okay, so here's my paddock. You can see there's these sort of water troughs here, so we need to watch out for those, but we can talk about that on our low pass. So I'm inspecting the paddock here already. We've got roads at either end, obviously, which is good access for us to walk up to a farmhouse or something to get some help. Speed is now good at 70 knots. Okay, so we'll keep our descent going here. We'll descend to, let's call it 800 feet. And that should be about 500 feet AGL, so I've got a bit more descent to go. See, all these shadows, these are actually cows on the satellite photo. There's the college on the nose. Okay, still give me a good look out. T's and P's in the green. Speed is good. We don't want to turn too tightly at lower speeds, slow down like this, because our stall speed is increased when we're in a turn. Keep that descent going. Okay, there's our paddock. Keep the turn going. Okay, power's off a bit. Now I'm just going to fly on the right hand side of our chosen paddock so I can look out my left window and have a good inspection of it. you think this is 500 feet? Might be a bit low. Okay, good. That's what I thought too. Okay, some cows under the trees, but the paddock itself we've chosen looks clear. You can see four-wheel or motorcycle tracks down the middle. Watch your speed. So the middle is clear. Just got to watch out for the obstacles are those water troughs. Okay, so we'll just go around from that. Join a downwind. And we'll maintain 500 feet for this, so we'll just call it 1,000 feet. Brakes are checked, undercarriage down lock, mixture full rich. Fuel cock is on, hatches and harnesses are secure. And for this one, we just keep a continuous turn going. We don't actually roll wings level for the downwind. So it's just a low level circuit. Keeping our lookout going. Okay, we're downwind. Check my trim. Trim seems to be a bit off. Okay, I'll go flaps 20 now. Catch that. Okay. There she is. Okay, you can take us down to 200 feet when you go around this time. Okay, understood. Okay, I'm going to put my carpet out. All clear. Speed's good. Okay, flaps 30. Okay, carpet goes in. Extend it a little bit far this time. We can make it work. Okay, we're on our way in there. Okay, go around. Okay. Full power, flaps 20. Watch out for the tree. Okay, target speed, flaps 10 is 70 knots again. Okay, can you just give me a climbing turn to the right, please? Okay, no problem. Flaps up. So I'm looking for 70 knots. We're all clear on the left. Climbing turn at 70 knots to the right. And they're not going to give you feedback as well. He's not going to say, yeah, it was a really good job, or that was terrible. So you really don't even know if you passed the flight test until you get back. I mean, there's some pretty obvious hard fail items. So if you really cock up your forced landing, where it's clear that you would not have made it, then it's an instant fail. He'll just say, okay, you can head back. If you maybe don't do something that well, like a medium turn or even a stall, it might just tell you to do it again. But if it's a hard fail item, then you'll be shit out of luck. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty rough, but I don't think there would be anything that would be hard fail so far. So we'll level off at 1,500 feet again and make our way back to the airport to set up for our landing training. So this is all our circuit stuff. So we'll level, power comes back. He's going to want to see the join. I'm just trimming nose down, check the flaps are up, T's and P's in the green, good. Okay, so when we get back to the circuit, I'd like to see you join the circuit, and for the first one, if you can just give me a normal landing with a short field landing, please. Okay, no problem. Now, they might mix that up a bit. They might actually want us to do the short field landing after the final glide approach, because that pretty much finishes off. So the engine failure after takeoff and the forced landing without power, and even that precautionary landing, they are all should really be short field landings because we're landing on small paddocks. So it makes sense to actually do that after the glide approach, but in this case the guy hasn't. So the airfield should be just up here, it might be just here actually. Fielding traffic, Stealth Mike Oscar, 1,500 feet, 2 miles north of Cheltenham, Colleton, to join runway 28. And the examiner might say, oh, is it runway 28? How do you know? Well, we took off on runway 28. What if the wind's changed? Okay, yeah, good point. And then you think, do I make another radio call? Oh, well, I'll just stick with it now and see what happens. But that's the sort of thing you've got to be aware of. Don't assume that the runway you took off on is the same one that's going to be favoured by the wind when you get back. Now, it probably is, but you can't assume. I have to say that having flown here a lot in my life, this is very immersive. The way these hangars pop up in the distance that identify the airfield is just how it is. It's so cool. And here's the town of Fielding. Palmerston North is over here. You can see the Warranty Peak on the Ruahine Ranges, Manawatu Gorge just here, Wind Farm, the Taururas, Kapiti Island away in the distance. So we've got a bit of dead space in the lesson, in the exam here. So again, you might get a couple of questions, or the examiner might be kind and just give you a moment to catch your breath and start thinking about the circuits you've got ahead, because you can still fail any one of these exercises. So as I mentioned, we're going to do a few circuits here. So the first one, we'll just join the circuit and do a normal landing, and then we'll do we've done enough go round, so I think he's happy with our go round performance. Then we'll do a flapless landing, and these will be touch and goes, and then the last one will be a glide approach. So for this one, we're going to do the overhead rejoin at 1500 feet, and we'll make that into a short field approach. So for this, rather than the 70 knot approach speed, we'll use 60 knots, and as soon as we touch the ground, we are going to put the brakes on and try and bring it up as short as we can. And so for that, in actual fact, I think it makes sense to do touch and goes and do the short field off the glide, as I said before. So new plan for this one, I'd just like you to do the normal landing to a touch and go, and we'll do the short field landing off the glide approach. Okay, no problem. So change of plans. So for the overhead rejoin in it, I'm not even sure if they still do these in New Zealand, to be honest, because it's kind of it's not the safest way to approach an airfield. No one else in the world does them, but I'll do one for old time's sake. So we're at 1500 feet. Circuit altitude is 1200. I've mentioned in an earlier video that Haka airspace squashes this down, so normally it'd be 500 feet above the circuit altitude. So we'll just cross over, descend on this non-traffic side here, come back over the 10 threshold and join downwind. So having a good look out, no traffic around. Fielding traffic, Delta Mike Oscar, approaching overhead 1,500 feet, descending non-traffic side to join downwind, runway 28, touch and go. Okay, I'm going to reduce the power a bit here, and we set up for our descent. Airfield's just passing us now, so we're within the inside the circuit, so I'm comfortable to start descending. And keeping that good lookout going, all clear. Okay, and we're looking to level off at 1200 feet, so keep an eye on that. T's and P's in the green. Looking for that windsock. It's 1200, so we'll level off, increase the power. Okay, you can see the windsock just behind the strut here. So we're still favouring 28. And we want to keep that 1200 feet over this threshold, because we're assuming that any aircraft taking off won't have reached 1000 feet by the time they get here, so they'd be taking off underneath us. So there'll be no conflict, but not always the case, and obviously depending on how long the runway is as well. So 1200 feet all clear as we join into the downwind. Okay, circuit's still clear. I've got some children running around outside, so apologies if I have to talk to my children. Generally not a factor. You've got enough problems doing a flight test than without having to worry about your children. So clear on the downwind, all clear. So fielding traffic, Delta Mike Oscar joins downwind, runway 28, touch and go. And that's really the last radio call we need to make. Okay, just keep an eye on that altitude. And it's nice and easy. I've said this before, we've got our landmark is really the gorge down here. Is the runway. Okay, about halfway down the strut. Pretty good spacing, not too bad. So we're coming up being the threshold, so at this point we put our carpet on, looking for 70 knots and setting up a bit of a gentle descent, just trimming for that. Flaps 10. Brakes checked, undercarriage down and locked, mixture is at full rich, fuel cock is on, hatches and harnesses secure. Okay, keep that descent going. Really hard to get the trim set up in this thing. You just don't have the control feel, and it's just so pitchy. And just encroaching on my runway a bit, so we'll start our turn. See, it shouldn't be climbing, silly. Go flaps 20. Looking for the runway, there it is. Keep that turn going. So we want to be turning final at about 700 feet, so 500 AGL. It's not looking too bad. Speed's a bit low, but it is going to be a short, no, it's a normal landing, isn't it? So we want 70 knots. There's so much drag, you know, oops. So I'm at just flaps 20 with almost full power and barely maintain 60 knots in a descent, so it's just not that accurate, I'm afraid. Okay, we'll start a gentle turn to final. A lot of people do make a turning final call. If it's a busy airport, you might consider it, or if it was busier today, but with no traffic, I'm satisfied. Let's go coming up to 500 feet, turning final, so carpet goes cold. Okay, 70 knots, looking good. Okay, flaps 30, so we've got full flaps now. Lining up on the runway. See, that speed has gone way back. I really want 70 knots, but you can see how much power I need. I'm going to just drag this thing in, and it's not a shallow approach, you know, it's quite steep. Shouldn't have so much power. Stop complaining. Okay, so 65 knots. Not quite lined up, but it's not too bad. Just aiming just on the other side of those numbers. Okay, it's a little bit of crosswind, not much. Okay, power's coming off. Remember this is a touch and go, so power's to idle. Look at the end of the runway. Check. Lovely. Flaps 10. Keep it straight. Full power there. We're airborne. Okay, good. Oops. Flaps up. 70 knots. Good look out. Okay, flapless for the next one, please. Okay. So we'll see. Won't have to worry about drag this time, will I? Flapless landing. So the key points with a flapless landing are it is a lot shallower, and obviously it's going to be a bit faster too. So if I can do this around 70 to 80 knots, I'll be happy. Approaching 500 feet, so clear to the left. Start our turn. So this is the crosswind leg. 70 knots is good. Continue the climb to 1200 feet. Okay, there's crosswind. Okay. Alright, and we're all clear in the downwind. Turning to downwind here. And I'll just start bringing that power back as well. .70 knots is good. Continue the climb to 1200 feet. Okay, there's crosswind. Okay. Alright, and we're all clear in the downwind. Turning to downwind here. And I'll just start bringing that power back as well. Okay, so just sorted the children out. So approaching downwind here, so brakes are checked, indication lock, mixture for which, fuel cook on, hedge now secure. Heading traffic, Delta Mike Oscar, downwind runway 28, touch and go. So a little bit closer on this one. Let's get my spacing right. a bit high too. Yeah, so flapless landing, as I said, so just be a bit shallower because we won't have the nose attitude so steeply pointed down, and because we don't have the drag, we'll be a little bit faster, and so that changes our flare a little bit as well. So yeah, I haven't tried that before in the sim, so kind of curious to see how it goes. But considering my complaints with the drag of the flaps, then I am actually kind of looking forward to it. Alright, let's start a bit of a descent here. So car peak goes on, about 1700 RPM. It's the numbers you'd use in the aircraft, and yeah, 500 feet a minute would be a pretty good start. Something like that. 80 knots, yeah, it's good. It's about right for flapless. Okay, it's the airport about 45 degrees back, so we'll start that turn. So it's just a about 20 degree angle of bank to turn base. Keeping a good lookout going. Okay, that's base. Nice. And so no one's going to get grumpy with you for doing a long final with flapless, because you'd rather come in shallower so you can keep the speed down because you don't have the drag. So generally you'll do a longer final flapless as well. Yeah, speed's pretty good, 70 knots. Okay, about 600 feet there. Okay, start a gentle turn to final now. 70 knots, pretty good. So this is more like the speeds you'd be flying with flaps. You can see we're a bit lower, it says 500 feet turning final, so we're in good shape there. Okay, car peak goes to cold, so we've got full power available for our go round. So you can see that we've got a shallower approach here, or the attitude is a bit shallower. Speed's a bit high there, 80 knots, but I've got plenty of power on, so I can just reduce the power. And try and get it back to 70 knots if I can. Should be okay. Okay, and we're setting up for our last circuit with a glide approach. Okay, that's pretty good, 75. Okay, power coming off there. And just a gentle flare, so we don't want to float too far. Okay, touchdown, keep it straight, full power. Pretty quite quick, but we've got no flaps, airborne. 70 knots for climb. Okay, very nice. We'll just do the glide approach for the last one, please. And this will be to a short field landing. Okay, thank you. Alright, setting up for the last one. So we're climbing out, T's and P's in the green there. All clear to the left. Okay, clear. Approaching 500 feet, start our turn. So essentially, we're just going to finish off what we've done a couple of times before with the engine failure after takeoff. And we'll just do a trouble check, so it'll be fuel mixture ignition power as we initially have it, and then we'll just be looking to go all the way down to the ground. Now, as you can see, it's quite a narrow runway. All clear, some traffic up in the distance still. Okay, turning downwind at 1200 feet there. Clear. Just letting the nose drop on the turn so that we level at 1200 feet. Now this is important, remember that, because we know it's coming, we can manage the spacing, so you don't want to sort of make it too hard for yourself by being too far away. So I'm just going to set that spacing a little closer. And he's going to give you the engine failure somewhere about mid-downwind or just past it. Now remember, for an engine failure, we're aiming for a third of the way into the field. So about the point where that extension is there, where the strut is now, is where our aim point. Okay, so he's going to say, right, engine fails. Okay, carpet on. Fuel cook on, mixture full rich ignitions on both. Power is to idle. 60 knots. So trim, 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 trim. I'm going to start the turn now. So we do want a descent going. I'm looking for 60 knots. So we really just use the flaps to steepen up our approach. Fielding traffic, Delta Mike Oscar. Glide, downwind 28, glide approach. Full stop. Okay, I'm going to go flaps 10 because we're quite close. I'm still aiming here, remember. So speed is good, just over 60 knots. Happy with that. Quite high, but we're descending. Brakes are checked, undercarriage unlocked. Mixture is full, rich fuel cockers on. Hatches and is secure. Carpet goes to cold now. Flaps 20. So now that we're starting to get committed to the approach, we can bring our touchdown point back. Okay, so I know I can make that, so I'm going flaps 30. Now my eyes are moving from this point to this point. Speed is good. We do not want to get too slow though, so now we're going to just aim it directly for our touchdown point and try and keep that speed around 60 knots, which it is there. And remember, as soon as we touch down, we're going to max braking to stop as quick as we can. So I'm still idle. Okay, all good here. Speed's good, 60 knots. Okay, we need that extra bit of speed to make it over the fence. It's pretty tight, but we'll make it work. 50 knots. Okay. Alright, I think that's going to be about as close as you want to cut it there. And flare. Okay, max brake, keep her on straight. Alright. Sticks full back. Right, we did it. Okay, well done. Taxi us back, thanks. Yeah. Heading traffic is Delta Mike Oscar is taxiing to vacate runway 28 for stand 9. I don't know about these stand 9s, there's no such thing at the airport, so we'll go flaps up there. One thing you can do is put your flaps up on a short field landing to dump all that drag as soon as you touch down. I didn't do that. Normally I do, but that's something that the examiner might comment on. So vacating the runway, just going to do our taxi back check. So landing lights off, strobe light is off, transponder back to standby, flaps are up. All right, we did it. So that was a run through of the one thing I didn't do was compass turns because they're boring and they take a bit of explaining. So I left those out, but otherwise we covered pretty much all of the aspects that I can think of. I might have missed some bits and pieces, but generally the airmanship was where you are, where you're going, what else is out there, your lookouts, and the threats, and so on. So I didn't go into a lot of the threat management stuff during the flight, but those are the exercises. As I said, just what you saw is what you got there. I haven't practiced this at all, so it's a bit rusty. The airplane doesn't perform exactly how the real aircraft does, particularly with the flaps out, so I have to make a little bit of compensation for that, but otherwise actually not too bad. So I'd like to think if I did a PPL flight test tomorrow that I'd have a pretty reasonable shot at passing it, which is, you'd hope so, considering that I get paid to fly jets as pilot in command for a living. So you'd like to think that I could actually fly a bloody plane. So arriving back where we were, check our brakes again, which we have. The last thing you want to do is get to your parking spot, find your brakes have actually failed and that you can't even stop. Okay, parking brake is set. Come back to idle. I'll just fast enough to get that voltage light out. We'll check 1215 to make sure that we haven't got our ELT going off by mistake. Okay, good. We can... the touch points are terrible in this, but we'd perhaps turn our radios off. We do the jet cut check with the prop, make sure that that is going to stop, and then mixture cut off, bleed any fuel out of the line. It goes. and battery off, mags to off, and switches, we can turn those off. All right, we're completed. So yeah, hopefully you got a little bit out of that one. That would be the, just a bit of a run through of what you could expect with a PPL flight test and some of the considerations as well. Very good. Any questions? Let me know in the comments. Cheers.